Hello everyone, today I want to talk about Russia's only aircraft carrier, which about be retired, sign great power in decline. Also, recent meeting Chinese and US foreign ministers paving way leaders meet September 3rd. Meanwhile, US aggressively raising tariffs Brazil and Canada, bringing back Monroe Doctrine. On July 11th, Chinese and US foreign ministers met bilaterally during the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting in Kuala Lumpur. This was the first face-to-face meeting between Foreign Minister Wang Yi and U.S. Secretary of State Rubio. Despite Rubio being under Chinese sanctions, he represented the U.S. as Secretary of State. Wang Yi met him professionally. However, photos released by the Chinese side only showed them sitting across from each other at a work meeting, no handshake photos. This shows China views it as a purely work-level meeting. They met for an hour. Besides usual formal statements, the main topic was likely mutual visits between the two countries' leaders. U.S. President Trump seems eager to visit China during the military parade commemorating the 80th anniversary of the War of Resistance on September 3rd.
After the meeting, the Foreign Ministry website released a message stating that both sides agreed the meeting was positive, pragmatic, and constructive, committing to strengthen diplomatic channels and communication and dialogue at all levels and in all fields, leveraging the role of foreign affairs departments in promoting bilateral relations, while managing differences and exploring expanded cooperation areas.
The U.S. side's remarks were more positive. After the meeting, Rubio told media he thought this meeting was extremely constructive and positive. He used extremely twice. He also said there are many areas where the two countries can work together. He said that the main message conveyed during the talks was that there is an opportunity for some kind of strategic stability between China and the US, two major powers engaged in commercial competition. He also mentioned that cooperation could potentially be carried out in certain areas, which would help improve communication and build mutual trust. When asked about the possibility of a meeting between the two countries' leaders this year, Rubio said the chances are quite high, but both sides must create a positive atmosphere and achieve tangible results. He estimated that the Chinese side would hope the U.S. creates a favorable environment for Trump's visit to China during the meeting. After the meeting, veterans actively expressed willingness to cooperate, contrasting Lao Doxi's prior claim that people like Lao Bai and I opposed Trump visiting China. Trump likes to visit China during military parades, for a U.S.-China-Russia leaders summit. Would Bai Ao really oppose that? Trump's tariff increase plans have more to them than meets the eye. On July 10th, during an interview with American media, Trump said he would impose a unified tariff of 15 to 20% on almost all trading partners that haven't yet been hit with tariffs. Trump said, "We will impose tariffs on all restricted countries, whether it's 15% or 20%. This is something we're arranging."
Trump also said that from August 1, a 35% tariff will be imposed on Canadian imports. On July 10, Trump posted a letter to Canadian Prime Minister Carney on his social media platform Truth Social, criticizing Canada for retaliating against U.S. tariffs. Canada did not cooperate with the U.S. but took retaliatory tariff measures, Trump wrote in the letter. From August 1, 2025, we will impose a 35% tariff on Canadian goods entering the U.S., independent of all industry tariffs.
This is separate from all other industry tariffs.
Canadian Prime Minister Carney responded on social media that day, stating that in current trade talks with the U.S., the Canadian government has firmly safeguarded the interests of its workers and enterprises.
And the federal government is strengthening relationships with trade partners around the world. Canada's Minister of Industry, Joly, took a tough stance, clearly stating, "We will firmly oppose this and will not compromise." In addition, Trump also announced that tariffs on Brazilian products would be sharply increased from 10% to 50%. In the official letter sent to Brazil, he stated, "One of the reasons for imposing additional tariffs is that Brazil has been insidiously attacking free elections and the fundamental freedom of speech of the American people." He made it clear that the tariffs are related to the former far-right Brazilian president. After the case involving Lula, Trump posted on his own social media, saying that the trial against Bolsonaro in Brazil should never have taken place. He condemned this action as a witch hunt and said it should stop immediately. He also stated that Brazil's tariffs would be calculated separately from tariffs in other areas. In other words, President Lula responded strongly, saying that Brazil would not accept being controlled by anyone. Brazil will negotiate tariffs with the United States, and if those talks fail, it will take reciprocal countermeasures, such as imposing a 50% tariff on products exported to Brazil. Back in April, the US only raised tariffs on Brazil by a mere 10%, because, in fact, Brazil has a trade surplus. In 2024, Brazil's trade surplus is $7.4 billion. To use Trump's words, they're making money off the US. They're talking about raising tariffs up to 50%. If Brazil also imposes a 50% tariff on American products, it doesn't seem like the US would benefit much. Of course, the US economy is huge, while Brazil's is much smaller, so Brazil's countermeasures against the US would have limited impact. Trump suddenly took tough action against Brazil and Canada, but the reasons he gave are a bit far-fetched, making people suspect he has other motives. He targeted Canada, saying Canada has retaliatory tariffs and a fentanyl problem, but actually, Prime Minister Carney is quite moderate. The retaliation was actually pretty mild, and as for fentanyl, only 5% of it is imported from Canada, so that's just an excuse. As for targeting Brazil, which has a trade surplus with the US, it's true that Trump doesn't like the leftist Brazilian President Lula, but when it comes to the former right-wing President Bolsonaro, Trump doesn't seem all that loyal either. This time, Trump is taking tough measures against major countries in the Americas. It seems like he wants to force these American nations to completely fall in line and do whatever the US says, because their economies are relatively smaller and weaker. The measures are relatively weak, and it's clear that Trump just wants to put them in their place. This also shows a kind of isolationist mentality in the US, treating the Americas as its own backyard to be completely controlled. In fact, more than 200 years ago, back in 1823, President Monroe announced a similar policy, which became known as the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was a foreign policy about control over the American continent. At that time, the US government believed that the European powers should not further colonize the Americas in the future, or interfere in sovereignty disputes between the US, Mexico, and other American countries. As for disputes between European countries themselves, or between those countries and their American colonies, the US basically maintained neutrality. However, if any such wars broke out in the Americas, the US would regard it as a hostile act. This was a turning point in US foreign affairs, and it remained this way until about 8 years later, when the outbreak of the World War brought changes. This kind of sphere of influence thinking really fits Trump's style. Right now, he wants to use tariffs to bring all the countries in the Americas completely under US control. Trump might even be thinking about calling for a new Yalta conference with China and Russia. However, Russia doesn't seem to be doing so well. According to a report from Russian news on July 11, the Russian Ministry of Defense might abandon the restoration of the Russian military's only active aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov. Currently, the repair and refitting work on this warship has been suspended. The report says that representatives from the Russian Navy and the United Shipbuilding Corporation have recently made a decision regarding the fate of the Admiral Kuznetsov. Experts do not rule out the possibility that this ship might be scrapped and dismantled due to technical and physical aging. Former commander of Russia's Pacific Fleet, Ayakenki, told Russian news that the decision to stop repairs is completely correct. If they decide not to continue repairs, the Admiral Kuznetsov can only be cut up for scrap metal. Meanwhile, Russian Academy of Sciences researcher Kalimik believes that aircraft carriers are crucial for the Russian Navy, as they can provide air support for long-distance fleet operations. He thinks that the Admiral Kuznetsov should be replaced by another warship. He said that some people believe it is no longer cost-effective to continue refitting and repairing the Admiral Kuznetsov, as the ship is already quite old, and its design and power systems are also unreliable. It's now 40 years old, and in 10 years it will be 50. Even if it can serve until 2040, that's not a very long time. Therefore, the experience gained from operating the Admiral Kuznetsov should be combined and used to build another warship. He said that Russia is capable of doing this, as they have shipyards that can build vessels of this class. The report says that the Admiral Kuznetsov has been undergoing modernization since 2017. However, several incidents occurred during this period. For example, in 2018, Russia's largest floating dock sank, causing damage to the hull of this ship. Then in 2019, this aircraft carrier suffered a major fire. To sum it up, first, if Russia doesn't repair or replace the Admiral Kuznetsov aircraft carrier, does it even have the capability to build another one? It's doubtful, and Russia might soon become a country without any aircraft carriers at all, which would greatly reduce its ability to project military power globally. This could be seen as the decline of a major military power. Second, in Trump's ideal world, there would be a big three, the US, China, and Russia calling the shots. But in the end, it might just become a world of two. That means a world of two powers, just China and the US, while Russia would be like Britain at the Yalta Conference, already on the decline.